agree with John, thank you, John. I can't remember names. I also agree with John that we're seeing a lot of stuff in fundamental frameworks. We are seeing a rise in third-party vulnerabilities, and he is right. It's the bedrock that all of the modern software is now built on, things like Java. And so I agree that having those framework people in this discussion, having them as part of the dialogue is one of the greatest things. And I think we would all be open to that.
Thank you. You guys are cutting actually into a topic which I wanted to get in a couple questions from here, but that's good. So let us now switch towards choices that the companies face. So once a vendor finds a vulnerability, once they find out about it, they don't find it themselves, but it comes out to them from a finder. So what are the choices the company faces at that point? So especially in regards to the complex software systems that we have nowadays, given all the frameworks and third-party code and open source and multi-vendor issues. So how do we deal with those to give people a better understanding of the internals of the vulnerability management?
You want to start this one? Or?
So I think the answer here, again, is coordination, and then when you're running out of things to do, it's time to coordinate some more. We are seeing more multi-vendor issues as things in the frameworks are getting hit. And I have to say that so far, in my experience, most vendors have been really eager to work together in order to hold back their public disclosure of the issue so that everything can get fixed and we can provide as much protection to the customer as possible. In third-party components, sometimes open source, sometimes it happens quickly, sometimes it's quite slow. And that is also something that can be a trepidation, but we just have to keep working as hard as we can and keep coordinating and keeping the dialogue open. We're not little isolated cells. So the way software works together, we're meshed, we're net, and we have to work together.
I actually think we've had a few recent examples as to how the industry has really matured. Kaminsky's DNS bug was a fairly decently done, but I actually think the Configure Working Group has been the most successful, I guess, program or communication coordination to date that's actually paid off and you know, positive things have happened. So I agree. You know, they were talking yesterday on the panel about you know, Google coming out and talking about APT. It's just the fact that vendors have got to be more open, and the fact that these, you know, some of these bugs actually cross over multiple platforms. You know, these kind of working groups and consortiums, I think, have been a huge one.
So absolutely, you know, one of the programs that I founded and I now get to run, after founding it, now I get to run it, the Microsoft Vulnerability Research Program, we founded it in 2008, and that was specifically to not only look for vulns in third-party products on the Microsoft platform, but specifically to deal with multi-vendor issues. So if there is a vulnerability that affects one of our products, and there are even competing products out there that may use similar techniques and may be vulnerable to similar attack techniques, then, you know, we actually don't want to ODay anybody else, you know, so we actually needed to take this function and provide, you know, a distinct mechanism by which we would do very deliberate coordination with other members of the vendor community, you know, including our competitors, and the word I like to use all the time for this is coopetition. I mean, there's no reason that our mutual customers should be, you know, the battle proving ground, you know, for our competitive landscape around security. There's absolutely no reason for that, and I think, you know, I think there's a lot of room for multi-vendor coordination, and, you know, Microsoft tries to do this and has done it in a few cases. Last year's ATL vulnerability was an MSVR coordinated multi-vendor issue vulnerability. You know, we'll see the DLL preloading issue, you know, that has been popular recently, also, you know, being coordinated through MSVR, and it has made a big positive difference. A lot more of the affected vendors who would not necessarily have gotten that information, we were able to use our resources to reach out to them, get them that information, and give them that head start that they needed before broad public disclosure took place.
This is one of the, I guess, scenarios or situations where I think there's a big difference between a product-specific vulnerability in a product company, which can be handled one way, and a cross-cutting vulnerability, which can occur in a product environment, or more likely a web-based vulnerability that affects potentially an entire portfolio of applications within a business. Most of the organizations I'm working with are aware of 300 to 3,000 to 4,000 apps in their organization. Those are the ones they're aware of. They typically have anywhere between 100 and an infinite amount of code. And when they find a new vulnerability, they ask themselves, how many of my applications are vulnerable to this? And how on earth would I answer that question? Think about that. How on earth would you answer that question having found something in a pen test and a code review through research in your own organization? Who would you even, there's some coordination aspect of that, who would you even call to figure out where all the other apps that are pertinent are? How would you figure out pertinence? How would you figure out vulnerability? How would you figure out exploitability in those situations? How would you decide on impact? That's a paralyzing visibility problem for most organizations that I work with. There are some technologies that my company's built to do full portfolio scans, but just think about the time or cost associated with running a dynamic or a static analysis tool to automatically detect that stuff, and figure out what would come out of those tools and how on earth would you reap through that information to figure out the vulnerability, exploitability, and impact questions. You can't begin to start thinking about how you're going to, actually remediate the issue and prioritize the remediation until you have the visibility. And so if visibility is something your organization's not thinking about across your application portfolio, I would say it's time to start things like, the OWASP top 10 are pretty well covered by scanning tools, but when the new fire drills come, how are you giving management that visibility?
So some of the complexities with multi-vendor issues, etc. However, I'm a finder. I just found this bug. I come to you and say, look, it's simple. It's, in my mind, a one-liner change. And it takes you guys, 6 months to roll out patches? What's going on? So can you explain some of those processes that you have to go through in order to make that patch available to your customers? Kelly?
Hi, so I've been at Symantec since 2003, and I've gotten to do development, QA, in the enterprise and consumer products. So I've gotten to spend many years seeing the other side of the development. And so what sounds like a one-line code fix that any monkey could do ends up being, like so many things, a lot more complicated. Just because what happens is after the team and we have assessed the vulnerability, then we look at the code. Then we have to wonder, it's like a Jenga. If I take this block out of the Jenga block, what else might I actually collapse? And so along with checking that and doing all the testing, we also ship to languages all across the world. I think we recently added Swahili to the consumer label. We have to get that localized if there's any words there, so that our Swahili customers and German customers understand any text changes. It goes through QA and all the way through the pipeline until it's ready to patch. Because if we were to do an inappropriate patch that either didn't fully patch, made the customer more vulnerable, or cut functionality, then what have we really gained? So this almost comes back to that old carpenter's tale where you measure twice and cut once. We would rather have the right fix than just to be able to say, oh, we've got something. And we've seen a lot of times in the past, several years ago, when companies were trying to just get it out as fast as possible. I think there was the bear share issue where they just kept getting out the wrong patch, but man, they were quick. So.
I just want to add, I think to some extent, I think people are kind of used to the way Microsoft does it. Everybody's used to getting updates every month. And there's surprisingly very few vendors actually that have that kind of process. Microsoft and now Adobe, every single month, we know exactly which day. But honestly, most vendors aren't like that. Oracle does their updates quarterly. I can't tell you how many vendors out there don't do patches, and they will patch that bug when the new release comes out. So it's, to some extent, perhaps we're a little spoiled. Used to vendors actually coming out with some patches, very regularly. It's not the case with every vendor.
So I've also had a varied and storied career in this space, and 10 years ago when I was a Linux developer and I'd watch bug track for vulns in packages that we included in our Linux distro. It was my job to go ahead and go into the source, edit it myself, roll the new RPM package. My testing consisted of does it compile still? And, hey, you, buddy over there, does this compile for you? All right, great. Put it up on the FTP server, send a note to bug track, we're done, And essentially, in that era, and, in my open source, Linux world, I was able to get a patch out in less than 24 hours. Wow, wasn't that fantastic? However, it was truly outsourcing all of the application compatibility testing, functionality testing to our customers. We were outsourcing that function. So, without a vendor taking responsibility for the quality of the update, the comprehensiveness of the update, you end up in a situation where, you may patch fast, but you might not patch very well. And Microsoft itself, I've only been at Microsoft for about 3.5 years, but, so they tell me, long ago, it was, we had to get to a place, we evolved to a place where we had one day of the month that we would issue patches, and updates. Before, there were, we were in a rush to patch very quickly, and we did have to reissue some patches in the early days. So if you think about, there are 12 Update Tuesdays in a year now, right? 12 times that customers know that they're going to get updates from Microsoft. We had 12 updates come out in a 6-week period, sometime in, I believe 2003, just because we had to reissue a whole bunch of updates. So, if you imagine the customer churn around having to jump to it and test our updates so many times in such a short period of time, it actually wasn't helping them be more secure. It kind of made them take a step back and say, you know what, I'm just going to wait. I'm going to wait. I'm not going to deploy any of these patches. I'm just going to wait and let other people kind of work out the bugs. And then when it's stable, I'll go ahead and apply it when I feel comfortable that it's not going to break something in my infrastructure. So what we've done, is we've taken responsibility for doing all of that type of testing ahead of time in the most common configurations, and really making sure that when we do come out with an update, that it's tested to the level that our customers feel comfortable rolling it out very quickly, and that is what gets them protected as fast as possible.
I think this is another situation you have to ask yourself, are you responsible for a product, or are you responsible for an application deployment in an organization and environment? These guys know much better than me, and have just explained, if you're a product situation, you have one thing and there's a million billion different ways it's deployed, and you can't guess it a tenth of them. So quality testing, those become the long poles. In an organization, I think the long poles are a little bit different. One of the things that my war story was not Linux-based. I was building a trading engine. I said, why is everyone getting everyone else's messages? Why don't I just send partners the messages with their message ID? So I'd made that change, and I committed it, thinking that they would speed the system up. It did. It made this system roughly 100 times faster. But there was actually a trading partner that flew someone, 5 scary people, down within 12 hours to intimidate me to change that back, because they liked looking at other partners' trade data. And that was its own mess. But, you have to worry about, the surface and the connection points as an organization as well. And what are the systems? Everyone thinks of 3-tier systems as pretty simple: web, database. There's always other interfaces. There's always other things you're not thinking about. Identifying the code blast radius of the change is very important. For those of you who have tried out O2 and other static technologies. There are some advanced and kind of scary tools you can use to start to look at this, but the problem is harder than you expect, and it's actually hard to figure out what that blast radius is. We had a consultant do an analysis on one of our clients, because you hear in the OWASP community a lot, let's stamp out